I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Hello and welcome back to the Fire and Rain Conversation series, a series designed to inform and empower bushfire-prone communities to live safely with fire. I'm Emma Ashton and I'm here with Rachel Lopes, and today we're exploring a topic I think is the most important of all, learning from the ground up, why it's so essential at an early age to connect with the natural world and start to think about fire, particularly in Australia, and why we need to understand it. We acknowledge the Ma people of the land we're speaking from today and their deep and continuous connection with the land, and we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging.
Hello from me too, and a very warm welcome to our guest today, Dr Briony Towers, Research Fellow in the Centre for Urban Research at RMIT University, member of the Bushfire and Natural Hazards CRC and co-chair of the Australian Children and Disaster Community Practice. And also a very warm welcome to Kaz Standish, our fabulously active and passionate local primary school teacher here at Forrest Primary. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to have you. We're excited. Briony, we might start with you. You've been exploring how children living in bushfire-prone areas perceive bushfire risk, and something you call place-based participatory education, that not only grants children access to essential knowledge and information, but empowers them to voice their perspectives, educate others, and take meaningful action on the risks they face. Can you tell us some of the key learnings of your research over the last 10 years?
I sure can. I'd like to acknowledge the Djadjurrung people of the Kulin Nations, whose traditional lands I'm coming to you from today, and acknowledge their elders past and present. So my journey into children's bushfire education started about 12 years ago when I began my PhD research on children's knowledge of vulnerability and resilience to bushfire in southeastern Australia. And at that point in time, there was very little, actually no research on how children understand bushfire risk. So I couldn't even write a lit review at the time because there was just no literature. All of the research on children and bushfire had focused on psychopathology in the aftermath of bushfire disasters. So things like PTSD, anxiety and depression, and children's post-disaster adjustment. So I was really starting from the ground up. So the title of your podcast today is very apt. So I began that research by doing focus group interviews with about 140 children living in high bushfire risk areas around Victoria and Tasmania, aged between 6 and 12 years old. And through that experience, I was able to get a really deep appreciation of how children construct knowledge of their social and natural environment. And I've worked really hard to try to incorporate those learnings from my PhD into the research that I've been doing since, which has actually involved designing and evaluating bushfire education programs, predominantly with children in upper primary school, but we have also done a little bit of work with year 7 and 8 students, so that lower high school kind of bracket. So I think we've learned a lot, and in terms of probably what is most important is what I would have said back when I finished my PhD research, was that children have really deep insights into their social and natural environment. It's really important that they're able to access credible, trustworthy information about bushfire to help them build their understanding of bushfire hazards and bushfire preparedness and mitigation. But at the same time, we always need to centre them in the process, because they are the ones who have that really intimate understanding of their everyday lives. And as we know, disasters are, you know, constructed in the fabric of everyday life. So that's probably the key learning that I would want to share at this point.
Thanks, Bryony. Kaz, you're a local teacher here in Forrest, and you studied forestry before turning to teaching. How does Bryony's research resonate with you and your experiences?
Yeah, oh look, I've loved hearing and reading a little bit more about Bryony's work, because I think that very basic premise of involving children in their learning, like in their context of where they live, is actually how kids learn. Like, they're naturally interested in their place, their spirit of place, and how they can be involved. So it's that whole saying, involve me and I'll understand. And I think my experiences in not just teaching in Forrest but in other places is that by providing that authentic learning experience does really deepen not only the kids learning, the process of learning, but the connection to their community. So yeah, I do think it is really important. And I think for me, Black Saturday, having a baby at that time, from here on in, our life in summer has been about, it's been about being prepared. It's being about explaining to the children without freaking them out that, on a total fire ban day, we leave our property and things like that. And then when I did return to the classroom, it's so much more, the conversations we're having at all times during the year, whether it's the fuel reduction burn. So, when we see smoke at school, what does that mean? So it very much resonates, the involving the children at the centre. I love it.
Bryony, stepping back to last year, I was at the Disaster Resilience Conference in Melbourne in August, where the Year 6 students from Strathurn Primary School gave a presentation to a packed conference room about the bushfire program, similar to the one we've started at Forrest this year. It was my favourite presentation of the conference. It made me laugh and cry listening to the kids, educating us adults about fire, things like the fire triangle, using a fuel moisture meter, and the fire rating index. They seemed so knowledgeable and empowered, and I thought, we have to start this program in Forrest. Can you talk about why it's so important to start at an early age?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why it's so important is that children actually really do want to learn about bushfire, especially if they're living in a high risk area. So, we can't assume that just because we're not providing information or education to children that they're not thinking about these issues, or that they're not concerned or worried about these issues. And I think once we start to engage children in the classroom in learning about bushfire and the roles that they can play in reducing bushfire risk, we really start to see them take on that role with so much enthusiasm and so much creativity. And I think what always strikes me when I'm working with children in this area is just how much they care, and how much they care about their natural environment, how much they care about each other and their families and their communities and their pets and their livestock. And so I think, on the one hand, it's that they really want access to these learning opportunities, but on the other, they just have this incredible contribution to make. And the research that we've done, where we have actually been able to centre children in that learning process, the outcomes in terms of their knowledge and skills and understanding of bushfire is quite amazing. But it's their ability to educate others and influence the decision making in their household, in their schools, that's actually really special. And I think as more people start to understand the role that children can play in risk reduction at the local level, we have more opportunities to keep gathering that data and that evidence about what works for whom, under what circumstances. And I think that, you know, it's a real shame that children have been excluded and marginalised for so long, because we're real. I mean, in our research and in so many other programs that are being run, you know, around the country, not just with bushfire, but with a whole range of other hazards, we're really starting to see how valuable this is. And it's not just about children learning this now so that they can make a contribution now. It's so that they can grow up having that sense of place where they live, the environment in which they live, that fire is a part of our environment. It's not something that we need to fear. And I think that's something that, you know, is a real issue in Australia, is that bushfire isn't understood as a natural part of our environment. So I think if we can provide children with that understanding from a really young age, not only do they make really important contributions to bushfire safety, but they grow up with that understanding, and then they can pass that on to their children. And we can actually start to build a culture of living with fire in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it was my first action when I returned from the conference to get in touch with the primary school and encourage a program similar to the one at Strathewin. So we've started that now in Forrest, although it's been a tricky year, so we haven't, that hasn't progressed as perhaps it might have in other years. Back to you, Kaz. We got in touch with the local CFA guy that helps with his stuff, Jamie McKenzie, he helps implement the Survive and Thrive programs in other schools. What have you noticed already about how the children have responded to this type of learning so far?
Yeah, oh, well, it's been overwhelmingly positive and on so many levels, because it's not only so Jamie, he arrived with bells and whistles and he immediately engaged the children. But I think even before that, the kids, most of the kids, so we were doing this, we started it with the grade 5s and 6s. They already have connections with fire, whether it's parents working with DELP, CFA, family, living on farms, just living here. But it was really nice because Jamie, he was tapping into what they already knew. And, you know, I was blown away. With what they already knew. And, you know, and Jamie, I think he might have been as well. So that was great. And I think for me as a teacher, because I think this discussion about, you know, deep learning and you know, learning about place, the kids, their stories and the strengths that came out. So kids that might have been, you know, quiet in the classroom, all of a sudden, like, we couldn't shut them up. So that, yeah, and so on, you know, it's that learning on so many levels, because it's that that identity things and being proud of, you know, their families and what their histories are. So that, yeah, that was fantastic. Then I guess from what we've already seen was just the enthusiasm, and like exactly what Briony was saying, they do want to learn. And when Jamie appeared with that mega sized, the MacArthur Forest Index meter, like, I was really excited. And, you know, the kids were up and they were moving and they were running outside using the wind meter. So it was great. It was that, and it wasn't dumbed down. It was completely at their level. And, you know, the other sessions that we've done since then, they've been fun. They've been fun and informative, and the kids were definitely wanting more, which we're plodding along with it. And I'm just really grateful that Emma did come and approach the school, because it was so, timely, even over time.
I'd love to hear some more examples from you both about some of the perspectives from the kids in particular, like what they learn from it. Briony, can you think of some stories or examples of the research you've been conducting with the various primary schools and how that's translated into, you know, the resilience within the community and the sharing more broadly?
One of the projects at Harkaway was looking at what to do if it's too late to leave. And the children that worked on that project understood the importance of leaving early and making sure that, you know, you have a bushfire plan and that you can, you know, avoid being, you know, actually exposed to a bushfire if possible. But they wanted to know what to do if you can't leave. And so they worked with Dustin Leonard and Rafi Blanchie from the CSIRO to build their understanding of the different steps that need to be taken if it's too late to leave, to safely shelter in place. They learned all about radiant heat. They learned all about, you know, how to prepare the house, what to be doing while the fire approaches, as the fire passes over. And they were going to make a film, but they actually ran out of time. And so they did an interactive workshop with the grade 3/4s, which I think was actually worked out really well, because it was much more interactive and I think probably a lot more engaging for the grade 3/4s, but it really gave them that experience of sharing their knowledge in real time, which gave them a sense of their capacity to educate others. And so then of course they all go home and teach their parents what they've learned. And I think one of the really interesting things was that as they were running these workshops, obviously grade 3/4s are quite a challenging age group to teach. So they had to be, you know, they had to manage these, you know, these groups of these younger children, and it was really challenging for them. And we had a discussion at the end about, you know, how it went and how they think it went. And they said, well, it didn't really go as planned. Like, you know, there were a lot of unexpected problems that we had to deal with. And then we kind of talked about, well, that's what a disaster would be like. And that was really interesting, because I think sometimes in bushfire education, you know, sometimes we see some really beautiful, sophisticated learning artifacts that can kind of make it a little bit daunting for schools to want to take on this kind of project-based learning. But I think that particular group really demonstrated that sometimes it's messy and chaotic, but it's all really good. It's all really good learning.
Can you tell us about the Strathewen Primary School? In one of our episodes, we also talked about the importance of art and creativity in this space, and that combination with kids. I know Strathewen worked on an amazing claymation program, and how that went with the kids. Could you share that with us, please?
Yeah, so the Strathewen program is really extraordinary in that it was actually undertaken in that post-disaster context where children had grown up in, you know, a community that had suffered so extensively as a result of Black Saturday. So, you know, 27 fatalities in that community of 200 people. So yeah, so I think what's really special about the Strathewen program is that it was really, I mean, there's so many dimensions to it, but I think one of the really key ones was that it was very community-based and very community-led, and it involved so many different people in the community, from the CFA volunteers to, you know, to parents, to, you know, the local police officers. And I think by bringing the community together around the children to work on those claymation projects, because remembering claymation is it's very labor intensive. It takes a long time to build all of those armatures and do all of that filming and pull it all together. But what those films are, it's a real community effort. So, you know, you go to the community helper days at Strathewen, where the children have the lists of all of the armatures that they have to have made for their claymation, and they just put the adults to work. And it's just a really special community activity, I think. And in that room of people working with the children, there are people who lost everything in Black Saturday. So that's quite extraordinary when you think about it, that, you know, that the school has actually created a space where the community can come together and work together on bushfire safety initiatives, and it's just so much fun. So when you see those films that Strathewen, or the books that Strathewen have produced, they're quite amazing in, you know, their production level, you know, the sophistication of their production. But what's most important is the process, and the process is community led. it's so inclusive. All of the children are involved, regardless of ability, regardless of disability, regardless of their level of bushfire related fear or anxiety. Everybody gets a chance to participate and contribute. And so I think that pride that comes out of those Strathewen projects is probably the most important thing I found in my research there. There's a sense of pride amongst the children and the whole community.
Thank you, Briony. I mean, I guess this is some of that community supported learning that the kids can do at our primary school is where I'm hoping to get to as well. Because the Forrest Primary School has had a Bush Kinder program for many years and a focus on nature pedagogy. Can you talk to how that's been playing out over the last few years in our community?
So Forrest Primary School has been doing a what we call Forrest Kids Go Bush nature pedagogy program, and it was started, it's a really long time ago, by one of our parents, Kim, and the premise is getting kids outdoors, and it's very unstructured, it's very play-based, and we love it. And we are finding, I mean, with the department, we're always, looking at explaining why we're doing what. But one of the things that we've really seen a lot of benefit in, it's the collaboration, the problem solving, the creativity of the children. It's a multi-age space, so the kindergarten children come out with the prep 1-2s, and they have become more comfortable. There's a lot of, it's almost like found objects. They're making their own fun, and they're playing with kids that they normally may not play with, and they have the grand purpose. The play is so intense. But one of the things which I think is why it's a natural lead into the Survive and Thrive is we do have fire. We have a little fire most weeks, and the kids cook, and they bring out whatever they've got in their lunchbox, whether it's an apple, a banana, I don't know, lemons. And I guess that's for us, that's part of it, is we're trying to teach them that nature, it's learning with nature, not just about nature. So taking the kids outside to do that. And we just find it's one of the highlights of not just my week, of the kids' week. They get out in their overalls and they're allowed to use the fire flints. It's a little bit like they're creating their own learning space. It's fantastic.
Wonderful, thank you. We've seen the kids in action doing that and just see the joy on their faces, and it's so grounding and so natural for them to be playing outside and with fire and experimenting with things, and it's beautiful.
It is. We've had a few parents that have been a bit nervous about, these 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds with the fire flint, but you just have to, the kids step up. They're not silly, and they understand, and they've come up, we come up with our own rules together. So it's very much a collaborative area. And and it's always really sad when they finish up with the Forest Kids Go Bush program. But we are, throughout our school, we do have other nature-based programs as well. So we're hoping, and 2020 is not the year for it, but we are hoping to extend it up through the upper years.
Fantastic. I'm going to take you both to a different space now that we like to we go to in our conversation series now, and that is to reimagine our future. We haven't talked about it yet, but Briony, you were originally talking about the information used to be very top down and directive when we're learning about bushfire, and things are slowly changing, but I guess I would love you to reimagine that future where we're doing things really well. The schools are really wonderful learning environments, and they're producing, leaders in bushfire space in the future. I'm hoping with your experience, you could take us there and reimagine what, if it was working really, really well, what would that whole system look like? If you could describe it for us in detail, perhaps Kaz first this time.
Oh, it's such a good question. I think for us to be doing things really well, like in an ideal world, at schools, it would be programs like the Survive and Thrive, where we are building the capacity of our children all the time through a living curriculum. There'd be a few less walls. We'd be outside a lot more. We at schools, we have to balance the demands of the curriculum. But upon saying that, we all know authentic learning experiences are the ones that have the long-lasting impact. And I think we just need to be bold, and we need, there would be the department and teachers would be confident in that ability that this actually matters.
Thanks, Kaz. And what about you, Briony?
Yeah, I'm with Kaz. Less walls. Breaking down those walls, and not just the walls between the classroom and the outdoors and the community, but the walls that keep children excluded from decision making around bushfire risk policy, research and practice. So if everything was working really well, it would be that children are actively participating in the design and implementation of policy, research and practice in bushfire risk management, and they'd be doing that at a local, state and national, and potentially even a national level. So their voices would be included in decision making. They would be listened to, their perspectives and experiences would be respected.
I couldn't agree more, and I love the scale that you brought it up to as well, Briony. And I just think there's no limit to what the kids can be involved with and the value they can provide, and as even in the policy space as well. So listening to the kids and having them actively involved, learning and being empowered would be a wonderful place to be. We're getting to that point where we both like to, because we're covering some pretty, this is a beautiful topic and full of hope, but in some of our other topics, it's been a bit harder. But the question to you both, and Kaz, will start with you. What gives you hope?
Look, I gave this quite a lot of thought, actually, because I've got lots of hope, lots of reasons that that we like schools can create change. Definitely young people, they are our greatest asset, and I love my job. I've got a group of 5 to 8 year olds, and it is why I get up in the morning, because they're fun, they want to learn, they believe in themselves, and that change. We've done some work on climate change, and there's no limit to their creativity. But on top of that, I think the other part of that hope is campfires. I'm a big believer in the campfire. I love the campfires at Forest Kids Go Bush, when we cook together, we talk together, we tell stories, friendships are forged and ideas are hatched. So that's what gives me hope. It's the young people and campfires.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thanks, Kaz. And what about you, Briony?
I think I feel really lucky, actually, because working with children and young people every day, there's something that gives you hope. So whether it's the passion that they have to protect the environment, to stop climate change, or whether it's the things that they want to do to make sure that their families, their siblings, their friends are safe and looked after. I think there's an ethic of care amongst children that is really interesting to me, and I wonder to what extent we get that knocked out of us a little bit, as we have to kind of fend for ourselves out in the world. But I think that working with children and young people, there's just constant reasons to feel so hopeful. And I think going back to the Harkaway children, one of my favourite projects that the children worked on was protecting wildlife after a bushfire, and what to do if you find an injured or abandoned animal. And they just had the most amazing learning journey, which was so self-directed, and they were just so empowered by the whole process. And at the end of it, they said to me that their only regret with their project was that they hadn't had a chance to talk to the local Aboriginal people, because they'd been there forever and they knew so much. And, you know, these are 11, 12-year-old children, and God, that gives me hope that, you know, this generation of children and young people just have so much insight and respect, and and that they have hope as well. You know, I think for as long as they have hope, we have an obligation to them to not give up hope ourselves.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much, Rach. I'm going to indulge and say that this is what gives me hope. This was one of my outcomes that I'd anticipated for the podcast series in general, was that we would introduce bushfire learning and that nature-based focus around understanding our landscape in primary schools throughout Victoria and more broadly in Australia. So that's what gives me hope, is that we can deliver a good message about this one and get people to engage with it who are the decision makers in our society and can help implement these programs. So I want to thank you both for your time today and for sharing your research and experiences with us. We have a great vision for how things could be in the future, and we look forward to supporting that in our neck of the woods, at least in Forrest. If you'd like to know more about this topic, links to Briony's research and the Survive and Thrive program are available on our website at fireandrainconversations.org. And if you have any questions, comments or feedback from today's episode or for the conversation series more generally, please also get in touch via the website. Thanks very much to you both today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much. Great topic. And Briony, I'm so pleased to be introduced to your work. I'm excited. Come and visit us.
I would love to. I would really love to. You can count on it.
Great. Yeah, that's great.
But I always thought that I'd see you again.